but that leaves my creative brain sitting in the corner in the recesses of my mind, feeling like a neglected child, just not really nurtured, just sometimes just sitting there for weeks, months on end without ever really being addressed. Hello, and welcome to Thoughts Unchained, a podcast where we discuss philosophy, societal norms, aspects of our lifestyle, and even some more light-hearted topics in an open-ended conversation. Hope you enjoy this episode, and prepare to keep your head in the clouds. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Thoughts Unchained Podcast. I'm your host, Armaan, and in this episode, I'll be doing things a little bit differently than I've been doing recently. I'm trying something new here, a mini-series of solo podcasts, which will probably be called something like Mini Monologues, my musings, by the time that this episode is out. In these episodes, I'll just be talking about a topic for maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes, just hollering at you, just sharing my thoughts and opinions with a little bit of research, a little bit of background knowledge, and it'll probably be pretty difficult for me to look at the camera the entire time just because I'm not used to doing these solo podcasts, so beware if you're watching the video version if I'm not looking at the camera the entire time. If you're listening on audio, then perfect. Ignore everything that I just said. Before we get into today's episode, be sure to support the podcast on whatever platform that you're listening to it on. I would greatly appreciate that. So if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to like the video and subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast on another directory, on another platform, whether it be Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon TuneIn, be sure to follow on that platform. And for all the latest updates about the podcast, be sure to follow us at Thoughts Unchained Podcast. We post teasers, clips, and just other updates and cool facts about Thoughts Unchained. Without further ado, I'm going to get into today's topic, which revolves around the balance between academics and creativity. Some of you may be able to relate to this topic. Lately, I've been realizing just how difficult it is to balance out academics and creativity. It's really self-explanatory. But I'll explain in a little bit more depth what I mean by that. Over the last 2 years, ever since I've gotten back into doing YouTube, when I say back, I mean I had a channel, a rinky-dink little channel when I was younger, where I just did gaming videos and things like that. Ever since I had the idea of starting up my own channel of AST Productions and then doing the podcast about a year and a half to 2 years ago, I found it really difficult to be able to make time to dedicate any time towards my creative projects because I'm very much committed and dedicated to my academics. I've had a very heavy academic course load over the last 2 years. I've had classes like pre-calculus, physics, chemistry, law studies, English. I got to make sure to stop swiveling in the chair. Again, I'm not used to doing these solo podcasts on video. I've only done one video podcast before this, but yeah, and then I've got stuff like calculus coming down the pipeline in the near future, and I've stuck with the mentality that it's better for me to focus on my academics because that is a more surefire thing. There's a more surefire path that comes along with sticking with your academics, trying to get the best grades that you possibly can, trying to get a scholarship, trying to get into a good post-secondary institution in hopes of getting a stable, secure job, one that will pay well, and one that will be able to support me. As I've been taught from a young age, a degree can very much be a ticket to a job at any point in life. Wherever you find yourself, having a degree can help you get a job. And as someone who takes a lot of pride in their work, I always try and strive to do the best that I can academically. And I've learned a lot in high school that I can't just breeze by without studying and without putting in work. And so I found myself increasingly doing practice. I never used to practice any subjects if I didn't have homework. I would just be relaxing or chilling or something like that. but I found that it's imperative to practice things like pre-calculus or physics or chemistry, just so that your brain can commit the subjects and the topics that you learn to long-term memory rather than short-term memory, rather than relying on rote memory. It's very much important to do a little bit of practice each day. I've always done my practice work, done my homework. I would just rely on that and then just review the day before. But now I'm finding that I have to do at least a half hour to an hour a day of practice, and I'm reading my notes every day. I didn't used to do that. I'm highlighting my notes. I didn't used to do things like these, but I'm putting in a lot more effort because I'm finding that in order to achieve the standard of excellence that I set for myself, um, and a lot of times I fall short to that. I expect a lot out of myself, almost perfection, but sometimes I fall short of that. But it still pushes me as far as I can get, and I know that for a lot of people, academics are hard, and so you end up having to put in a lot of time into maintaining that level of success that used to come really easily to you. And with that, and with the added commitment that I have to put into my schoolwork, I'm finding that during the school year, especially during the times when it's really busy, that could be when there are tests, when there are exams, when there are major projects or papers or essays to write, there's not a lot of time for this. First of all, there's not a lot of time for free time, for just relaxing and just sitting down. I recently just played video games for the first time in 2 months, I think. I was just talking to my friend, and I was just playing Smash Bros. I probably had, like, I'm recording this in mid-December. I hadn't played video games probably since October-ish, which says a lot that a lot of us are really busy. We just don't really have time for ourselves, time to spend with our families, time to play sports. I haven't really had time to be active, which is really bad and it's not healthy. Probably be doing another one of these solo podcast episodes on health and lifestyle, but I'll save that for that episode. And correspondingly, there hasn't been a lot of time for Thoughts Unchained. My goal was to have this season 2 released in January sometime. When I called it for season 1, when I just wrapped it up, I wasn't planning to go season by season. I was just planning to make this podcast a bi-weekly podcast, just have it consistently ongoing. But I had gone maybe 4 weeks without recording a podcast, probably more than that. And before then, it had been a 4 or 5 month stretch where I was consistently posting. Myself and Devin were consistently posting bi-weekly. So I just called it, and I thought, okay, I'll take the next 4 months or so, record everything for season 2, and hopefully have 10 to 12 episodes ready. Have everything edited, have all the promotional content, ready for December, and then in the new year, probably spend the winter break, finalizing everything, maybe doing a bunch of promotional stuff on Instagram, and then roll it out in January, so that while my school is going on and while I have a much busier second semester than I do a first semester, with the heavier course load and a lot more extracurriculars, just pre-schedule all my episodes to come out, so that all I have to do is I just have to put out, I guess, a few teasers on Instagram. The episode will auto-release, and it's December 18th today, and I only have about 4 of the normal episodes with other people recorded. These bonus episodes are only meant to supplement those. I was kind of hoping to do 3 episodes a month, actually. Just throw these ones in as a bonus episode. But I'll see. I'll have to see how things go. It might not be until February that you end up seeing the first episode of season 2 come out. This might be sometime in mid to late February. Who knows? Maybe it'll even be in March. I really hope that it'll be sooner than that. With luck, the season 2 will come out in January. But I often find that during the school year, like in the last month or two, I've had times where I have these ideas coming into my head because I've started in the summer. I started to write down ideas on paper. Like I've got my notebook right here. I'm just going off of my notes. I used to look at my computer for my notes. I probably shouldn't have lifted that up because anyone who's listening on audio probably wasn't a fun time for you. Sorry about that. But ever since I've started writing down notes, I'm finding that they crystallize better in my head. Things just flow so much more naturally. And I've learned that no idea is a bad idea. So every idea that I have, I come back to a lot of ideas realizing this wasn't that good. But at least I wrote it down because it usually takes me somewhere. But now that I've started writing these ideas down, sometimes they'll be stuck in my head for the entire day. Sometimes I'll get these ideas when I'm in class. I could be in pre-calculus class trying to take down notes. And I do take my notes, but I have to ward off these thoughts at times because I don't want to be distracted from my academics, especially when you're first taking notes. That's the time when you're first learning something that information needs to, you have to be present when you first learn something because that's the foundation for your knowledge of that particular subject or that topic. But then I'm sitting here thinking about what videos I could do on AST Productions, or I haven't posted on AST Productions since the summer, probably payoff season. So nearing 5-6 months without a YouTube video. A podcast episode hasn't come out until, since probably August. And that just, it goes to show how busy a lot of us are with school, and that could extend to post-secondary students who have a lot of university workload or college workload or trades or whatever. A lot of people with their jobs, people who want to post YouTube videos or podcasts or such, but they're busy working. It's really interesting if you spend maybe 6 hours at school, 8 hours at your job, that you would think that, okay, we've got the weekend to work on it. But then sometimes you're so exhausted from your schoolwork, from your job. Some people who have jobs where they have to allocate their weekend to their work. Sometimes you're just too exhausted to do things like a podcast or a YouTube channel, or say you're a social media influencer or whatever you may do. You might produce music, you might make beats or something like that. That it's hard to manage. And then sometimes you just don't have time on the weekend because, say, if you're a student like me, you might have a project due, and I usually am ahead and on top of this stuff, but because I'm so busy, sometimes I can't get things done several days in advance. Sometimes I have to work on it the weekend that it's due, even though I don't like doing that. Sometimes you got a test to study for the following day. And then ever since I've started working part-time, especially since my work has been really busy lately, having several shifts per week, it's just less time. And then having extracurricular activities as well, having meetings, having things like that, it eats up a lot more time. But sticking to the idea of academics, sometimes I'll try and be studying for a test in 2-3 days, or just doing revision the night before, trying to do practice work, and I get this idea of this podcast that I could do, or this YouTube video that I could do, and I start writing it down in my notebook because I don't want to forget it. And I'm in the habit of writing everything down because I know that I'll come back to it later. But then I get these great ideas and I'll be writing for like 20-30 minutes, and then my brain is just going creatively, and I'm like, man, focus on your trigonometry, focus on your logarithms, your, even last year this happened to me at times, focus on your physics, your like forces homework or whatever it is. Focus on your law assignment that's due tomorrow. Recently I read up about this theory about left brain versus right brain. The idea, this theory was revolving around the idea that your left brain is more analytical and methodical by nature, a lot more conducive to academic settings, very inclined towards mathematics, maybe linguistics in a more academic and formal setting. And thus, it'll help you in, say, your schoolwork, especially higher level academics, post-secondary, perhaps even your work, problem solving, logical thinking. And then your right brain is said to be more creative and I guess what's the word that I'm looking for? Subjective? I don't know. It's just more creative, more open-minded, more flexible, and more conducive to things that are out of the box and thinking out of the box. This theory has been disproven over the years because of a lack of conclusive evidence that supports it. But it's interesting from a theoretical standpoint that I find my academic brain and my creative brain are just clashing constantly. They're just fighting each other. Usually it's my academic brain that gets the better of my creative brain. Again, I'm not saying that this is actually a real thing, having academic or creative brain, but just for the sake of visualizing it, my academic thought process usually wins out because I know that it's a more disciplined thing to do. For me, anyways. A lot of people have different paths, different viewpoints that I know that I'm probably going to regret it if I don't focus on my academics, because it is more surefire and it generally has a more proven path to financial stability, success. But that leaves my creative brain sitting in the corner in the recesses of my mind, feeling like a neglected child, just not really nurtured, just sometimes just sitting there for weeks, months on end without ever really being addressed. Like this past summer was probably one of the happiest times of my life in terms of a mental well-being standpoint, because without school or without anything to do, and I like learning. I love learning. I find it really interesting to learn about so many different subjects. And I would say that I like school. Of course, it's repetitive and sometimes it's tiring. Sometimes it's boring to do the same work over and over again. But I like learning about a lot of different materials. But without school in the picture over the summer, I didn't take any summer courses, unlike the year before. I had time to work on the podcast, had time to work on ASC productions. I also just had time to walk to the park. Like some weeks it was every day, some weeks it was 3-4 days a week, sometimes 7-8 a.m. in the morning, sometimes midday, sometimes in the evening, with the longer days, bright outside till like 9 p.m. and just go play soccer, play basketball, sometimes play hockey in my driveway out on the back street, in the alley I should say. I had time to do some just at home workouts, time to go for a run, time to keep myself active. I had time to make my own meals and just keep myself healthy. But above all else, what I appreciated was having time to be creative, having time to even just listeners of the podcast will know that I just as a hobby, I just like producing music. I haven't done that in 4 or 5 months now. That was something that I spent some days I spent several hours doing if I was just in a flow. But I really had time to focus on making some really meaningful videos, making some video essays. I made the documentary Payoff Season. Some gaming videos, put a lot of time and effort into them. And I really have big ambitions for this podcast, for my own channel. Not necessarily from a money-making standpoint, but just to try and help people. Just to provide entertaining yet informational, I don't even want to say content, I would rather just call it media, because I feel like sometimes content can just be when you're making something for someone else for the intention of it being watched, or for the intention of getting as many views as possible. I almost view it as art, not that it's some Picasso or something, but I just don't have a lot of time to create many works of art or any types of media, digital media, that I really like making, because I'm really focused on trying to get a scholarship and get into a good post-secondary institution and set myself up for a good job, because down the line, my goals for my 20s are that I would like to be able to work a job for a few years, get at work a good high paying job for probably 5 to 10 years. And then I'm hoping that after that I can become location independent, become a full-time entrepreneur. I don't know if I'm still gonna have an interest in this kind of stuff, in podcasting and creating digital media down the line, but I would like to be able to just be independent, to spend time with my family whenever I want to just to work out or to play sports whenever I want to actually have time to every day make my own meals, make healthy meals, right? Something I'm going to cover, the importance of diet and healthy eating in another episode, and how we often don't get time to make healthy meals. Spend time just meditating, reading, maybe traveling, but doing charitable work and things like that. But I'll need to build up my own brand in order to do that. And I'll need to build up some kind of a business, right? I'm hoping that I can sort of build awareness, build up some of my personal brand through the podcast, through my YouTube channel. But again, I'm not too sure when I'm going to have a lot of time to do that. I have some time now on winter break. I have some time next summer. And it's really interesting to me that the things that I was interested in 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, the visions and the ambitions that I had in terms of wanting to make YouTube videos, the types of videos that I wanted to make, I still have interest in making those videos. Maybe it's because I haven't spent a lot of time making videos, making podcasts, making short films. Short films particularly being the thing that I still want to work on. It's probably that these ideas have been buried under the surface for so long that they haven't been fleshed out. That's probably why I'm still interested in them. If I had been doing them every single day, maybe I would lose interest in them and say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. But I'm a big believer that if you have an idea, this might be going off on a tangent a little bit, but if you have an idea that you're somewhat interested in, you might as well try it. Because let's say you try it and you realize that you don't like it, that idea would have just been sitting inside of you for a long period of time. But at least you fleshed it out. You brought it to the surface and you examined it. You determined that you tried it and it was something that you didn't want to continue with. At least you found that out. It's critical to find that out, because then you're going to have these lingering feelings and these things that can just eat away at you and wear away at you on the inside. I've wanted to do short films for a long time, and other than the documentary, I haven't really had the chance to do that. I wanted to do that 2 years ago, but then the pandemic disrupted that because we weren't able to meet other people, and as a result, we couldn't get together and make films. But now, because of my schoolwork and because of my academics, I often find that I spend at least an hour and a half to 2 hours, if not sometimes 3 hours a day, working on my academics when I get home. And then that doesn't leave a lot of time for even just self-care or even just downtime, let alone podcasting, let alone recording videos. Because sure, I could record a podcast, I could schedule a day with a few people to record one. I could just pick a day and just start editing a YouTube video. But then I'll be neglecting my academics, and I've learned that you can't cheat the game when it comes to expecting to do well on your tests or your exams or whatever, or your essays, without doing the preparation that's necessary. And because there are massive implications with my future, I feel a lot of pressure in order to focus on my academics. I know a few people who you might see on the podcast sometime soon. They're creatives as well. They're whether they make videos on YouTube, whether they post on social media, whatever they may do, they've mentioned that they haven't had time recently to focus on this kind of stuff because they've been allocating their attention towards their academics because school has been getting really busy. Um, I've heard of people online, YouTubers, creatives, who are really busy with, say, university course load. Maybe they have work on top of that, work as an employment, and they don't really post that often on YouTube or on whatever social media that they're on. And sometimes I wish that I had more time. Sometimes it makes me feel like it makes me think that that's the biggest driving force behind why I want to become location independent by my I would say mid to late 20s. Definitely by the time that I'm 30. I feel like, and my ambitions might change by the time that I reach this point. It might even change in a few years. But that's why I want to become independent and become an entrepreneur. But I know that I need to get a good job, and my plan has always been get a good job, save up money on the side, create a side hustle, and eventually let that side hustle take over my main job by investing the savings from my job into that side hustle. But that's the problem, right? Therein lies the problem. Not necessarily a problem, because I could find a job that I enjoy, right? And I do have an idea of where I'm looking to go into, but that's the thing. I almost feel like I have to put a lot of these creative. I feel like I'm almost putting a lot of my ambitions on hold for the next decade or so. And who knows if I'll have those ambitions in a decade's time, right? Um, Before I go to sleep, sometimes I'll have these ideas that are just racing through my head, and I'm trying to unwind before I go to sleep because it takes me a long time to sleep. I'm a very light sleeper. I usually take at least an hour to fall asleep, um, maybe an hour and a half, and so I've tried a lot. I've tried shutting electronics off. Now I shut off electronics at least an hour before I go to sleep every day. Usually an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. And I'll often read before I go to bed. I'll just shower and then I'll just read. Sometimes I'll meditate for 10 to 15 minutes per day. That's something I wish that I would do more consistently. But sometimes when I go to bed, when I'm just lying in bed, I'll get hit with these ideas. And at first I told myself, okay, just forget these ideas. You've got to go to sleep. But then I've been getting such good ideas, and you never know when a great idea might strike you, or you never know which idea might be your best idea. So because I've gotten into the habit of writing everything, which is now a blessing and a curse as I'm realizing, sometimes I'll be writing for 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes I go to bed pretty early. I often go to bed around 9:30 or 10. I wish I could go to sleep around 9. But sometimes I'll be writing for a solid 10, 15 minutes, even 20 minutes. I've had times in the summer where I've written for like 45 minutes. I just looked up at my clock and I'm like, how did that much time go by? And then sometimes I'm really trying to get a lot of sleep because I have an important test the next day. But I'm getting hit with these ideas and I'm stuck in a conflict. Do I just forget these ideas and try to go to sleep? Or do I write them down knowing that in the future, short to mid-term or even long-term future, these could be very beneficial ideas? It's such a conflict. Um, yeah, I think that I've really fleshed out everything that I had to say in this episode. I don't really want to drag this out, but it'll be really interesting. Please let me know in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube or maybe on Instagram. Please let me know what you thought of this episode. Can you relate to this? I'm sure that many of you can, whether you're working a job, whether you're in post-secondary, whether you're in high school, if you're a creative, if you've just had any sort of idea or ambition, you want to start a business, you want to start a podcast, YouTube channel, social media page, if you want to start a blog, a charity, nonprofit, anything, a lot of times you basically have to make time and you have to take a risk. And because in the society that we're in, a lot of times you get rewarded in the forms of scholarships and things like that, when you involve yourself in extracurriculars, when you focus heavily on your academics, which are things that I care about. I like being part of extracurriculars and clubs and things like that, but it just doesn't leave a lot of time for yourself, for personal growth, for building your own brand, for making something of your own. I know that it's a huge internal struggle for me. It's a struggle that I endure every day. In the summer, I realized just how much I enjoyed doing the podcast and my YouTube channel, and I forgot about that throughout the school year because I compartmentalized all of that so that I could just stop thinking about these creative ideas entirely, so that my brain wouldn't get clouded. And my brain has become very focused, very linear, almost like a well-oiled machine, like a juggernaut that's just running, so that I can um, put all my focus towards studying and retaining the information that I'm learning. But now over the winter break, just today, I've realized just how much I enjoy doing the podcast. I opened up my account on Buzzsprout. That's the hosting service that I use for the podcast. I looked at the statistics. They're not great. They've never really been great. But I mean, well, first of all, for those of you who have been listening to the podcast, even at this early stage, I appreciate it a lot. But man, you really forget about the passions that you have when you don't have time to focus on them, and then when you rediscover them, I feel that it's such a crazy feeling when you realize that you have ambitions of your own and goals of your own, things that you want to achieve, things that you want to do of your own, missions, projects that you want to start. But a lot of times you're tied up in obligations. A lot of times you have to make decisions for yourself, for your future, and it's just a huge conflict. But I'm hoping that I can try and make sense of all of it. I'm hoping that while staying dedicated to my academics and hopefully pursuing scholarship, hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully I'll have one shortly after this episode comes out. Hopefully those of you who are aiming for scholarships or to get into a school, hopefully you get into that as well. If you're in a degree program, trades program, you're working a job, trying to get a promotion, hopefully you get those. But if you also have a creative ambition on the side, hopefully you have time to pursue those aspirations. Because I know that it can be very painful waiting for the summer or waiting for the winter break or the spring break, because then you're putting your ambitions and your aspirations on hold for up to 5 to 6 months at a time. I know how that feels. It's painful. It wears on you, but here's to hoping that I'll get more time with this stuff. Hopefully you will as well. Like I said, please leave a like and subscribe on YouTube if you're listening to the podcast on that platform. Please be sure to follow on whichever directory you may be listening to the podcast on. Remember, we're on Spotify, Amazon TuneIn, Google Podcasts, I believe Apple Podcasts by the time that this episode is out. Finally, I was not able to get the podcast on Apple for season 1, but season 2 looks to be different. I don't know why I'm saying this. This is not gonna be the first episode of the season. This Apple Podcast is probably working by the time this episode is coming out. So just throw your tomatoes at me if you want. Throw your eggs at me. I sound like a fool right now. Once again, be sure to follow at Thoughts Unchained Podcast on Instagram for more updates. Thank you all for watching. This has been a little bit of an adventure. Me just rambling by myself, trying to keep this a bit concise, not wear out my welcome, not talk longer than I need to. Once again, my name is Armaan. Thank you so much for watching or listening or however you may be consuming this content. See you in the next episode, and remember, keep your head in the clouds.